Welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited to be going into a new year and having so many new books on my TBR. January is already jam-packed with a bunch of book releases that I'm looking so forward to reading. But before we get into the new stuff, we do need to discuss some of the books that I read this year. I'm not gonna go over all of the 60 plus books that I did end up reading, but I'm just gonna go over like the standout ones and the ones that I think about literally every single day. So I'm gonna tell you guys my top 5 reads of 2024 and also my top 5 worst reads of 2024. Now remember, if I didn't like a book that you absolutely love, that is amazing for you. I just maybe didn't like the book, okay? Maybe it wasn't my personal journey. I had a different reading experience than you, and that is a-okay. Doesn't take away your love for the book. My number 1 book that I read this entire year, without a doubt in my mind, is Magnolia Park's The Long Way Home. I will not shut up about this book. If you know me or have seen any of my videos on TikTok, you know that I quite literally will not stop talking about this book or the entire series for that matter. This one in particular just made me completely feel every single feeling that you could possibly feel. I don't cry at books very often, but when I do, it's because there's something baked into the story and into the characters that makes me so unbelievably attached to them that I can't help but just feel all of their emotions. That is exactly what this book does. Now, like I've said, the entire series as a whole is just so amazing and beautifully written. I feel like in this book we get a lot of closure. We get a lot of answers to questions that you may have had after reading the first Magnolia Parks book. Also really seamlessly integrates Daisy Hate's story into this as well. I absolutely freaking loved Into the Dark when that came out and it finished Magnolia and BJ's story as well. That was a really close contender because for me it was honestly a 6-star read, but this was also a 6-star, and because that one was a little bit longer, I feel like this one was it was perfect. I have absolutely nothing I would change about this book at all. And for that, it's my number 1. The next one also probably doesn't come at much of a surprise because I've also talked a lot about this one too, and that is Say You Swear by Megan Brandy. I put this off for so long. Like, why did I take so freaking long to read this masterpiece? Your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea. This gave me the same exact feeling that Magnolia Parks books gave me, in that it has a lot of drama and it has so much trauma that the characters have. And I feel like the character dynamic, because there's so many characters in Magnolia Parks and there's so many characters in this one, there's kind of this family friend unit that adds a lot of dynamic and a lot of tension and a lot of angst and, like I said, drama between every single character. So although the story revolves around the FMC and the MMC of this book, the other characters contribute to the story very beautifully and kind of make their whole story evolve. And without them, there would be no story and no plot to the book. This one was so good that it literally, I threw it across the room. Not this copy. I had another copy, which was the old covers. When I got to the plot twist and found out some things, I literally got so angry. Not angry in like a bad way, more like I just couldn't believe it, and the story was evolving so quickly and so dramatically that I threw it against the wall. That was probably a little bit dramatic and unneeded, but it felt right in the moment. Noah Riley has become one of my absolute favorite book boyfriends. He's probably my number 1 book boyfriend of the entire year. Truly one of the most beautiful stories ever. The next 2 were incredibly hard for me to narrow down, so I'm gonna say Powerless and Reckless by Lauren Roberts. For the sake of this video, if I have to pick one, I'm gonna pick Reckless because it was just so, I loved it. I ate it up, and honestly I think I enjoyed this one just a tad bit more than Powerless, just because it focused on Kai and Peyton a little bit more. Obviously I started off reading Powerless first. After that came out, Reckless came out, and I dove right into it. Kai is another one of my top book boyfriends for the year. I just love him. He's so yummy. He's so delicious. And I just love his relationship with Peyton. The two of them together and the way that Lauren Roberts writes about them, it makes you feel like you're part of their story. Like when you read these books, you feel so immersed in everything that they're doing. And she writes so vividly that I can like see every scene. Like I said, I love them both equally, but for the sake of this video, since I have to pick a top one, I'm gonna pick Reckless. Next is Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonin Young. You guys already know I absolutely love this book. I heard so much hype about it, and decided that this was the year that I was going to read it. I'm a hopeless romantic, so obviously that's why I love it and why I enjoyed reading it so much. And if you are a hopeless romantic and you just love to read like stories that are going to make you feel warm and fuzzy and have characters that you're going to just fall head over heels in love with, then you're going to absolutely love this book. There's not a ton of drama in it. There's obviously one main like conflict or thing that is happening in the book, which was a nice break from a lot of romance books. Obviously, a lot of romance books have like this huge, climax of an issue that they have to get over, and there's a lot of other, situations happening in the background. This one is pretty straightforward. It's very short. And it's just a really, really great, beautiful story. I think everyone should read this at some point in their life. I thought really, really long and hard about this last one because I wanted to make it count. My last top 5 best book that I read in 2024 is Bridesmaid for Hire by Megan Quinn. I love everything about this book, especially on audiobook. That's how I first read it. I read it on audiobook or listened to it on audiobook, and first of all, the voice actors, the narrators for this are absolutely phenomenal. I forget who it was exactly, but I know it's a dual narration, duet style. And I think that really made the story come to life for me. If I read it on paperback just like this, maybe I'd have a different feeling about it. Maybe I'd have a different opinion, but I truly think that because I listened to it on audiobook, I felt that much more in love with it, and I felt so much more immersed in the reading experience. This is a brother's best friend, fake dating, a lot of kind of like an enemies to lovers, I guess. There's kind of that element in there as well. And it just had everything that I love in a romantic comedy, because it's a rom-com. It just had everything that I love in a rom-com book. It made me laugh like so much, and it's a really good feel-good book, especially for the summertime, maybe the springtime. Like, you're not gonna read this book and not feel happy. You're gonna feel good, and you're gonna giggle, you're gonna kick your feet, and that's really all I ask for when I read a book, so it did that. Moving on to some of the worst books that I read this year. And when I say worst, I don't mean that they were absolutely terrible. I just mean that they were my least liked. My lowest rated books. They didn't leave an impact on me. Starting off with a book that I actually ended up DNFing, that is The Summer I Turned Pretty. I don't know if technically you count this as if you even count this at all, because technically I didn't read the entire thing. I did DNF it. I've DNF'd a couple of books this year, but this one in particular, I feel very disappointed because I've heard a lot of hype about it. Obviously, there's a whole show that came out surrounding this series. I love a summer romance, something very beachy, and I love reading young adult stories as well. So why didn't I like this one? It felt incredibly slow to me. The FMC Belly, I don't know if it's because it's a YA book that it read very, very young, but she was super insufferable and just made me angry every time she spoke. And I got maybe less than halfway through the book, and she just kept talking about this dang summer house, her family's summer house. And I was waiting for something to happen, and nothing happened. Maybe I should have kept reading and I would have gotten to something, but I lose my interest very quickly, and it just didn't capture me. And because I was so disappointed with it, it's one of my least favorite reads of the year. I'm so sorry. Maybe I'll watch the show one day. I know a lot of you guys said that the show is better. Next is Leather and Lark by Brynne Weaver. I enjoyed reading Butcher and Blackbird so much. I listened to that one on audio, probably earlier this year for sure. And I got really excited, and I figured that the second one would live up to the hype, and it just didn't, in my opinion. I'm all for dark romance, okay? I love dark romance. I love the comedy aspects that's added into these books as well. I honestly, I know it sounds really, really bad to say, and I don't mean it in a mean way. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I just didn't like anything about this book. I didn't like the FMC. I didn't really care for the MMC. He was all right. He was fine. Probably the best thing about this book. I didn't like the singing. I did listen to this on audiobook, so maybe it made it a little bit more cringe, but I didn't like that she was like a musician or singer or whatever, like an artist, and she sang a song. I didn't like that. There wasn't like enough tension for me. And the spicy scenes they were all right. They were fine, but they weren't anything to write home about. The ending was a little weird. I gotta be honest. I don't even really remember, or maybe when I was reading it, I don't understand what the plot was. It was really weird. It had something to do with like family dynamic or something, and it was a little strange to me. So again, this is another one I was a little disappointed about, and I think this has sealed the deal. I might not finish reading the trilogy when the next one comes out. What is it, Scythe and something? I don't think that I'm going to be reading that one just based off of not liking this one. I don't know. Next is Bared to You by Sylvia Day. This one had very much like 50 Shades of Grey kind of vibes going on, but 50 Shades of Grey it is not, okay? I was very bored throughout this book. I did not like the MMC at all. He was a little funky to me. Like every time he talked or said something about her, he kind of seemed a little pushy to me. I don't know. I just didn't enjoy the dynamic between the two. I didn't believe it at all. Her roommate's issue that she was having with him was weird as well. I didn't really enjoy that aspect. I felt like it kind of took away from their plot. I know that this book has a couple of other ones in the series, and because this one ends kind of on a cliffhanger, but I will not be finishing the series. I didn't care for it at all. Matter of fact, I just always forget that I even read it in the first place. Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that I read that. We also have The Last One by Will Dean. This one I read strictly because it was part of my book club, and this is the book that we ended up choosing. And I listened to it on audiobook. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. And I thought that listening to it on audiobook would make it even more enjoyable, and it did not. This is one of those books that would be an amazing movie, but as a book, it doesn't really make sense, which is really weird because usually it's the other way around where we love the book more than we love the movie. This one is the opposite. When you do find out what happens and like why she's alone on the cruise ship, I was just very confused as to why they chose that to be the reasoning, and nothing really made sense. And I felt like it was slow. There could have probably been maybe like 100 pages less. The last page did get me. Okay. The very ending of the book is pretty much like a mind-blowing moment for sure. And it makes you question a lot of things, but it wasn't enough to make me like it. I honestly rated this, I think like a 1 or a 1.5. It had so much potential. It didn't make the cut. Lastly was another audiobook that I literally just finished listening to probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and that is Beautiful Fiend. Now, I heard a lot about this one on TikTok as well. A lot of people were talking about it, saying that it was so spicy, very, very dark. It is a dark romance, so if you do choose to read it, definitely check your trigger warnings. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I kind of read the blurb a little bit about it, and it seemed intriguing. It seemed pretty straightforward as far as a dark romance goes. That first chapter or whatever I think it's the prologue that you read, things escalate really quickly, and I didn't feel comfortable with the way that they escalated and what happened. And I felt like the author, when she was writing about the FMC the entire way throughout the rest of the book, she was trying to justify the actions that happened in the beginning, and it just wasn't, I didn't understand it, and I didn't understand why. I think it was very pushing my limits for dark romance. I love dark romance. I've read a lot of dark romance before. And this was just, it hit that limit for me where I was like, no, I'm not comfortable with this. This is the limit. You know what I mean? And also there was minimal plot. The spice was okay, but it was weird. I just had a lot of issues with it overall. I did finish it. I almost DNF'd it, but I was almost too invested in the story by that time. I was just like, I already spent all this time listening to it. I might as well just finish it. And I sped it up a little bit too. But yeah, it didn't, no. I was literally telling my friend the other day, I was like, this is probably like the worst book that I read this entire year. I wasn't cool with it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really want to know what your top 5 favorite books were this year, and also what your top 5 least favorite books were this year. I know that this was such an amazing year for reading. I know a lot of people just got into reading, and there were so many brand new books that got published or republished with new covers. Overall, it was just a really, really exciting year for reading and for the book community. And I only hope that 2025 brings us even more books and more reading. So definitely let me know what your top picks were in the comments below. I'd love to know. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned today and how you feel. If you agree with me or if you disagree with me, that's okay too. And obviously you need to stay up to date on all the stuff that I'm doing on all my socials. So make sure you're following me on Instagram, TikTok, all the socials. And if you're not subscribed to me already on my YouTube channel, what are you doing? The button is literally down here. See you guys next time.